All right, welcome back to episode 7, I think, of Writer's Block. I am, of course, your host, journal staff writer Sean Reider. Been a minute since we've been in the studio. I think it's 2 months on the day since we were last in here, and we had Bronco Mendenhall in for a good long talk over the summer before fall camp started. Highly recommend going back and listening to that. A lot of the things he talked about are very relevant right now as we head into the season. At the day of recording right now, it is August 13th. We are just 11 days away, perilously close to UNM's opener against Montana State at University Stadium. And we are well into the throes, in the thick of it for fall camp at this point. Yesterday, I believe, was practice 16 overall out of 21. Pretty sure 21. And, there's so much more that we know compared to the spring. There's so much more we're seeing, particularly jersey numbers as well. 64 players now have jersey numbers, which is huge for beat writers like me who have been trying to identify new guys and also who's just playing well and who's kind of making an impact during camp. Purpose of this pod, it's just kind of get the pod going again, but also to talk a lot about what we're seeing on a position-by-position basis and what we've seen through fall camp to this point. I do want to start on one note with kind of a relatively hot take. I do think UNM, I will be willing to put my name on this, I do think UNM has had a good fall camp to start. I think every program will tell you that they had a good fall camp or that they're having a good fall camp. You're never going to really see a coach or players or anybody say that, yeah, we're not having a good fall camp. We're not really where we need to be. That's just not something. But from the outside looking in and from everything you've heard, when UNM says they feel like they're having a good fall camp, it feels genuine. It feels like there's a lot of really healthy competition. Competition is always good on a position-by-position basis, clearly. But it feels like there's competition with a lot of clarity at this point, which I think is the more important thing. You obviously have a ton of clarity at the quarterback position, but you're getting a little more clarity in the backup situation there. You have a ton of competition, I should say, in the running back room, but you're getting to see more and more clarity in terms of who might be the top one guy, the top two guy, or the top three guys, and what they can kind of do across the board. And I think that all that, the competition with clarity element, that goes a long way for me, and I think that should go a long way for fans to feel better about the team. They've had 2 scrimmages to this point, the only 2 scrimmages of camp. It's kind of predictable in the sense that some days it might be more for the defense, some days it might be more for the offense. I think you're seeing a little more of a split. I'll say that without being able to watch every single play of each scrimmage because a lot of them's closed off. But I think across the board it does look like it's been a good camp. It looks like it's been a productive camp, and I think that should be heartening to fans. But kind of to dive into a position by position breakdown, I do want to start with the quarterbacks. We've known since the spring, really since the first week of spring practice, that this was going to be Devin Dampier's show. He's really the most proven guy on the roster at this point. He's, the most refined guy in terms of playing the quarterback position on the roster right now, and it seems like there's been a lot of improvement. I wrote about it earlier during fall camp. He said at a certain point that it just feels like the game is starting to slow down, that he feels like he's able to see the offense a little bit better, if not way better, than he was during the spring, and that's to be expected. And, you're going to have those kind of, lumps that he kind of took a little bit in the spring in terms of adjusting to a new system. But, we haven't heard anything so far from any coaches or any players, about, things not going well at the quarterback spot. If anything, guys feel really good about where Devin is, and they've been pretty vocal to say that. The backup spot is still undecided at this point. They're going to try and pick one this week from what we know. I think most coaches do, prefer one backup, and Bronco Mendenhall, he was pretty clear that he prefers one as well. Right now, it's kind of a 3-man race between Isaiah Chavez, who's been here for quite some time, Emory Floyd, a College of the Canyons transfer, and then James Lobstein, I believe a Sussex County Community College transfer. Both Floyd and Lobstein came in over the summer. Mendenhall said on Saturday after the final scrimmage of fall camp that he does think that Chavez has a little bit, like a very slight lead in the room. Says he likes what what Isaiah brings to the room in terms of leadership capability. And he said there's a little bit there, but he's also noted that it's kind of changing on a day by day basis. Emory Floyd's really interesting to me. Mendenhall's talked about how he has he wants a guy to back up Devin with a similar skill set to Devin. So obviously, a guy that can make those throws that Devin makes and a guy that can also run like Devin does too and give you that edge as well. If not entirely give you the exact same edge, be kind of in in a similar range. I think Floyd is a guy who can do that. Jason Beck, the offensive coordinator, did tell me last week though that he's different from Devin in the sense that, this is his first time in this offense. He's still trying to learn it through. He's a younger guy than Devin at this point. And he's trying to just figure all that out. James Lobstein is probably the biggest departure in terms of style. James can run, but he isn't, a true dual threat guy in the way that Devin might be. But I have liked what I've seen out of James so far. It looks like a pretty accurate passer. I haven't seen him in extended live scrimmage action. I've seen about one live series out of him in the first scrimmage, but I don't know. I'm curious to see how that plays out. I think they're in a good spot. I think we're in a good spot to figure out where this is going to go from here. But I think I kind of noted this earlier. You have the healthy competition with some clarity. I think you got clarity at the top of the quarterback room, which is key. That's been key so far. But curious to see what route the backup situation goes. Want to also highlight the running backs. That is a place that, in some ways in the spring, the way I looked at it is that it could be the strength of the offense. You got Eli Sanders, who came in from Iowa State. He was the second leading rusher last season. Andrew Henry, who was a University of Louisiana Monroe transfer who came in last spring, had a high ankle sprain that kind of held him out of much of last season. And then Javen Jacobs, a Arizona State transfer who came in also came in before spring this year. In the spring, it kind of looked like a three-man race in some ways. I think it kind of paired a little bit more towards Henry and Sanders, and I think that's kind of what you're seeing a little bit more this fall. We've seen more and more Sanders with the first-team offense, especially this last scrimmage that we saw on Saturday. Back, the offensive coordinator even kind of said that there is a little bit, similar to kind of Isaiah Chavez and the quarterbacks, a little bit of a lean towards Sanders, and that it does feel like they kind of are at a point where there will be one guy coming out of games with more carries than the others. But the one thing that's clear is that they're all going to be used throughout games. They're all going to be used in different ways. Javen Jacobs is I think he is the best pass catching back that UNM has. These things that he does, it translates to the slot really, really well. The running backs coach, Kurt Garner, he noted that too. I think overall they added two different guys as well. Soljay Maeva-Peters, who's a former quarterback at BYU. He came in, he wasn't here for summer workouts from what I'm aware of, but he came in right before fall camp, so it's taken him a little bit to get up to speed. But Kurt Garner, the running backs coach, he told me that he's kind of starting to carve things out for himself. He just earned his number this week. Nikari Rogers is a Campbell transfer. He's also kind of looking for a breakthrough. That's what Garner said as well. And that's been a little bit apparent from the practice that we've seen to this point. But yeah, I think this is still probably the single deepest position that UNM has. I think they will be one of the key strengths of the offense. Now, if Devin takes a step forward that he absolutely probably could take forward, I think that he could end up being the true strength of the offense because of just the things that he does well. And if he does them at a very high level, then this could be a potentially tough offense to really stop. But the running backs are really key there. Some other guys, though, that have been getting some recognition, Cleveland High School alum Josh Perry. Massive. I think he's the biggest running back. I think it's really him and Soljay. Perry is a dominant blocker from what we've seen during practice and from what we've heard from guys. I like what he brings to the table in a lot of different ways. Jalen Morgan is also a guy in that room that has been pushing guys as well from what I've heard too. So I'm curious to see what kind of role he might carve out. Shifting over to the wide receivers, it feels like there's a little bit of a clear top five in that room with Caleb Medford, who was UNM's leading receiver via yards last season. Sean Miller, an Illinois transfer, Nick Trujillo, sophomore out of also from Cleveland High School. Luke Wysong, Cleveland High School alum, and also a guy that's been pretty productive in his time here at UNM. And then Ryan Davis, a UAB transfer that came in last year. It still feels like Caleb is the wide receiver one right now. It feels like that. It seems like he's approached in that sense. It feels like he is more of a leader in the room than he was last year, and I think that's carrying over onto the field as well. He told me yesterday that his focus is really getting his yak numbers, yards after catch numbers up this year, and that's kind of what he's been focused on the most. But I really like what Sean Miller and Nick Trujillo have brought. Trujillo's the one guy that's really intrigued me so far. Around this time last year, you would hear former head coach Danny Gonzalez talk about we got to figure out ways to get Trujillo on the field. We got to figure out ways to get Trujillo active in what we do offensively. And it didn't quite happen, and I think that was more just, UNM had to manage, what they wanted to do with DJ Washington at the time, what they wanted to do with Medford at the time, which was a different running back room. Jeremiah Hickson was always going to get targets too. It feels like right now that Trujillo's made a really, really strong push even from spring and now, and he was in a good spot in the spring. Played very well in the spring game. Some fans might remember. But it seems like he's being used in a lot of different ways. It seems like he's really kind of upped it a bit too. And, I asked Medford about him, and he said that he's seeing the same things too. He's a natural leader, and similar to Medford, that's starting to translate on the field. So between Miller, Trujillo, Wysong, I don't know if there's a clear-cut, wide receiver two. If Medford's a wide receiver one by, a little margin, I probably think it's, Trujillo 2A, Wysong 2B, and Miller 2C. That's kind of how I'm looking at it right now. And then Ryan Davis is the fifth guy, kind of an inside guy, more of a slot guy, from what I've seen too. He's been really consistent, and it's clear that the coaches like him and they like the way he can be used. Beyond that, I can't report that I've seen a ton out of the depth so far. And I don't mean that in a, haven't seen good things or I've only seen bad things and stuff like that. It's just we've had limited practice windows and haven't been able to break down, with some new guys in the room like, Elijah Brody, who came in from West Mesa High School. I haven't been able to see what he can totally do at this point. So I will leave that to the season. But that's kind of the wide receiver update that I have. Offensive line-wise, it's similar to basically the starting offensive line that UNM broke spring practice with. Baraka Beckett, Richard Pierce, Mackenzie Agnello, Wall Sunabo, and Juwan Singletary. All transfers, all guys that came in over the winter. That's the starting offensive line that you can expect to see against Montana State, barring injuries or something else completely unforeseen. The one thing that has been interesting to me about the offensive line so far is that, Beck and Mendenhall have both said that they feel the room is actually about 8 deep, which you'll hear coaches say that they would prefer a wide receiver room that's, 10 bodies deep or 10 plus bodies deep. That honestly really doesn't happen in college football. It might have happened back in the day when you didn't have, a ton of transferring. You didn't have really aggressive recruiting and stuff like that. You had guys that came in, stayed for 4 to 5 years, no matter what. It's just not something that really happens anymore. Both coaches, Mendenhall and Beck feel that 8 deep is about as good as it's been, honestly, with them, in terms of having 8 guys that they feel really good about coming out and that, they can come out to the field, come out and play and be productive. If I had to wager who the other 3 are with them, I would probably say Isaiah Solomon. He's a guy that played a good bit last year. He spent most of spring injured. He's been repping on the second team offensive line so far. And Beck kind of noted, he's like, honestly, if Isaiah had the spring to work with, who knows where he might be because he's made good strides since he got healthy. I would probably also say, I think Elvin Harris, who's a Campbell transfer, I think he's one of those 3. As for the third, I think it's kind of a 2-way race between, at least in my mind, between James Bailey and Tevin Shaw. But I'm honestly not entirely sure at this point. So I'm looking to get more answers on that. I'm looking to see more of that second team offensive line. But, I can't kind of keep beating it over. But, I mentioned earlier competition with clarity, and I think that's what you have in the offensive line room right now. And that's if anything, that's a pretty remarkable spot to be in, considering what UNM lost on the offensive line from last year to this year. I'll round up the offense with the tight ends. You're looking at a tight end room of led by Trace Bruckler, who played a million snaps last year. Everett Hunter, who dealt with some injury issues last year. Jackson Eaps, I believe it's Eaps, who is new to the team. Magnus Gears, who was also injured last year, came in. His first year was last season as well. And then Vincent Santos, a former offensive lineman. He is now a tight end. He was repping a bit during the spring at tight end. I think just more out of necessity because Gears and Everett weren't totally healthy at that point. It was really just Trace was kind of the one healthy tight end, and they made the decision to keep him at tight end full time. Max Lance was a guy that was playing tight end last year, was going to play tight end. He got injured. I think it was a labrum tear during fall camp heading into last season. He is now an edge, and we'll touch on the edges in a minute here too. But this is going to be a room where Bruckler is going to get a lot of snaps too. I've seen a good deal of Everett as well, a good deal of Gears too. I'm curious to see how much more those kind of latter two guys take on a role throughout the year and whatnot. Last year you had some guys kind of step up for a lot of the injured tight ends because that room was decimated. Bruckler was a guy that kind of carried it. And he said he feels good to go compared to last year, but I'm curious to see how that all plays out. That feels like the position that on the offense was maybe, I don't want to say the most shifting, but the most things kind of going on. But we'll turn the page to the defense. I want to talk about the defensive line and the edge groups. In terms of the interior defensive line, seeing the most out of Kyler Drake, Bryce Santana, USC transfer DeJon Benton, Old Dominion transfer Devin Branapps, Tyler Keeney, and then Garrison Walker, an Auburn transfer, the most recent guys to get here. That feels like the top end rotation from what we've seen on the defensive lines right now, or I should say the interior defensive line. I know that Dante Wilkins, their position coach, feels relatively good about the depth they got in that room right now. One of the things that I've noted and some things that I've written is that it feels like UNM is getting more pressure in general, and part of that is the defense they play, and part of that is the edges too. But I think part of it has been the interior line being used a little bit differently and kind of stepping up in different ways. I thought Kyler Drake made a really great play, bringing pressure on Devin Dampier on Saturday during the scrimmage that we saw. Bryce Santana has also kind of flashed in that a little bit too. Devin Branapps is a guy that spent most of spring injured, if I remember correctly. He's come back. I think he's just over 300 pounds right now, and he looks bigger. He hasn't added a ton of weight, but he looks more imposing, and he looks like he's getting way more of a push up front. Tyler Keeney's also a guy that's kind of been, from what I'm aware of, the leader of that group. I know Dante Wilkins is pretty high on him and what he's been doing. I think Garrison Walker is a guy that, it's his first time out kind of playing this defense and fitting in and all that. But he's a guy that they also feel good about as well. In terms of the edges, the one guy with a lot of experience in that room is Gabe Lopez, who played a lot last year. Beyond that, you do have some interesting additions, guys like Okiki Olorunfunmi, and Antonio Harris, who's also getting a little bit of interior D-line snaps. I'm curious to see how much that kind of plays out. But Okiki is a massive guy, very, very big, very muscular, a huge frame, and pretty athletic too. His thing is that he played 3 seasons at Weber State, and wasn't able to stay healthy for all that time, unfortunately. Right now, he told me last week that it's been going well in the health regards too. He does feel like he's having a strong camp. I would expect him to be a guy that is going to be starting for Montana State with Gabe Lopez. Max Elfman is a guy that played a bit last year, didn't play a ton. He's a guy that just continually showed up and made plays in a lot of the live situations that I've been seeing. And then Mozo Tuiteli, a California transfer. He came in pre-spring this year. That's a guy that's also getting some reps as well, kind of, that edge spot and working in there a little bit. Secondary was one of my biggest questions heading into fall camp. It felt like the part of the team that was the most unsettled in terms of, having clarity about where guys are going to play and how things are going to work out and what rotations might look like. One of the things that has I wouldn't say it's made it more of a question, but one thing that's made it a little more harder to determine is that UNM is cross-training guys between corner and, between boundary corner, field corner, and then field safety and boundary safety, and a little bit of nickel too. One of the main guys from that cross training, the face of that cross training really is Noah Avenger. He came in the spring, was playing a lot of corner. Now they've been cross training him with about 3 or 4 other guys to play safety. The rationale there, from what we heard from Mendenhall, is that if you can get the best 5 or 4 players in the secondary on the field at once and just keep those guys on the field, even if they're playing different positions, then you're usually going to end up with the best secondary that you got no matter what. That's been probably the most notable development that I've seen. In the nickels, you are seeing a good deal of Bobby Arnold III, Cam Watts, Texas Tech transfer, Noah Pollock Yates, and then Hunter Wiggins is kind of the 4th guy in that room right now. It's kind of flip-flopped a bit from Bobby Arnold III and then Cam Watts in terms of who might be the starting nickel, and it seems like that feels like a true day-by-day shift deal. Noah Pollock Yates has been injured, but he got back, I think, about a week and a half ago, was fully healthy a week and a half ago, and he's been getting some work in, some pretty solid work from what I've seen so far with the second team as well. The one notable injury, I would say for probably the entire team, is that Tavian Combs has been out all fall camp. Combs was injured last year. He had some lingering leg and ankle issues, and he was out all of spring ball, but expected. He told me at the start of spring practice that he expected to be back at some point during spring practice. That didn't happen. Now he's back, and he has been in a walking boot the entirety of fall camp. We don't have Mendenhall prefers not to address individual injuries. We don't have a real answer on when or if he might be available or what kind of timetable he is. I would probably feel pretty good about saying that I would probably wager that he will not be playing in Game 1 against Montana State. But definitely something to monitor there. There's a guy that was expected to be a contributor once healthy, and when you're at a point where you haven't played at all in this new defense during the spring or fall, that's a tough spot to be in. So I'm curious to see what happens there in terms of secondary. And then I'll wrap up these positions with linebackers. It feels like Dimitri Johnson and Mahalo Santoreneos, those are still kind of the 2 top guys in those rooms in particular. Mahalo's and Dimitri both actually had some little injuries, but they're healthy right now. I did see Jaden Wilson getting some reps with the ones on Saturday. He's a guy that has been productive, and I'm curious to see how much more of a role he can carve out and really what the linebacker rotations end up looking like when it is an actual game situation. One guy that has gotten some early praise, and he was injured for a little bit too, but he is back out now. Randolph Kapai, he's a Nebraska transfer. He was the former #1 overall recruit out of South Dakota State. Spent 3 years in Nebraska, never appeared in a game. Told me last week that he ended up, deciding to transfer out of Nebraska, but really spent, from last December to, about April or so back in South Dakota, spending time with family, trying to figure out what he wanted to do with football long term. UNM gave him an opportunity, and from everything I've seen so far with Kapai, it seems like he's made the most of it. He was in that second class of guys. I think that was a group of 17 to earn their numbers. And it's clear that he's going to have a decent role at the very least in the linebacker room as well. I don't have a great beat on this point at Tyreek Austin Cave, the former West Virginia Miami linebacker. Feels like a little bit of a question mark, only because he's had some time injured. And some of the young guys in the room as well, like Tabarachi, a former three-star recruit from Park City, Utah. Haven't been able to see a ton of him too. Colby Brewer is also an interesting story. He's from Lynchburg, Virginia, but I believe he's 29. He joined the team this summer. He used to literally defuse bombs for the Navy, and now he plays for UNM. He's been injured a good deal too, for most of fall camp. So we haven't been able to get eyes on those guys, but in terms of the top 4 of Dimitri Mahalis, Jaden Wilson, Randolph Kapai, that's kind of what we're looking at right now, what we're kind of seeing. I do think the depth in that room is pretty solid, but I'm curious to see how much more they can kind of cultivate even throughout the season. that is really all I have in terms of the position by position stuff. But I do want to have a couple schedule notes. We will be back next week, going into the full swing of the season. We will be hosting Victor Flores, who is a Montana State beat writer. I'm excited to have him on. If you have any questions at all for the next show about the team and what we're kind of thinking heading into the first game Montana State, please feel free to send them to Reider, SREIDER at ABQ Journal. We would love to have some fan questions and get into that. And we're also looking to have a post-game component this year, potentially something live where fans can send their questions in after the game, and we'll get to them during a live show that will later repackage as a podcast. But, hey, we're 11 days out. It feels good to be this close, and we're excited to be here. So thanks, everybody, for listening, and hope to have you soon.
Thank you for joining us. You can find this episode and all our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud. If you enjoy our podcasts, please like and subscribe, and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us continue to bring you more content like this. See the show notes for a discount on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading local news source.